Diplomatic bombshell. U.S. bypasses Israel, strikes direct deal with Hamas for Edan Alexander. Wow. Just let that sink in for a moment. It really hits you with a lot of questions, right? Right off the bat, we're diving straight into something pretty major today.
Absolutely. We're talking about the release of Edan Alexander, 21 years old, dual Israeli-American citizen.
After 19 agonizing months held captive by Hamas.
And what really jumps out immediately is how unusual this whole thing is, the way it went down.
Yeah, and our main source here is a CNN report that's been tracking this in real time. So we're getting not just the facts, but also that immediate reaction, the initial analysis.
Which is great for us because it lets us understand not just what happened, but maybe start thinking about the why and the implications.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
Unpack this surprise deal. How did it even happen?
What does it tell us about the dynamics, the power plays happening right now?
And maybe the biggest question for everyone listening, what could this possibly mean for the hostages still there? And the conflict overall?
A huge amount to cover.
Okay, so let's start with the release itself. Edan Alexander is free. The CNN report mentioned seeing almost live pictures from an Israeli military base as they waited for him. What was that scene like?
Well, the report described this multi-step process. First, Hamas handed him over to the Red Cross.
Okay.
Then the Red Cross transferred him to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. And you can imagine the tension, the anticipation.
Yeah, the report mentioned Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. People just waiting, desperate for news.
Exactly, that palpable sense of waiting.
And then we saw that first photo. It's quite something. Alexander, a Red Cross official, and masked Hamas gunman.
Yeah, very stark image. But then you hear about his father's reaction, quoted in the report.
Oh, that was incredibly moving.
He saw the picture, said his son looked a little bit pale and weak, but then just, that's my boy.
After 19 months. Just overwhelming relief, you imagine.
Totally. And the report pointed out something significant. The fact that he could stand.
Right. After being held for so long.
That detail, small as it seems, felt like a real positive sign. A glimmer of hope.
Definitely. But, okay, here's the huge twist. The diplomatic bombshell part.
This wasn't Israel's deal.
No. The CNN report is really clear on this. The United States, the Trump administration specifically, brokered this directly.
Working with Egypt and Qatar.
Yes. And Israel was, what was the wording? Completely bypassed.
Sidelined.
Sidelined. That's pretty major in terms of diplomacy in that region, isn't it?
It really is. And for you listening, think about what that means. The U.S. potentially prioritizing this specific hostage release, perhaps differently than the Israeli government's stated priority.
Which, as the report notes, the Israeli prime minister had always framed as, well, defeating Hamas, first and foremost.
Exactly. So this direct U.S. action bypassing their ally, it suggests maybe a shift in approach, or at least in this instance, a different calculation by the U.S. It's a significant move.
And the reactions. The report captures this complex mix, On one hand, pure joy, this celebratory atmosphere for Edan Alexander.
Understandably.
But then, underneath that, intense anxiety. So many questions from the families of the other 58 hostages.
And the report reminds us of the grim reality there. The estimates are maybe only around 20 of those remaining hostages are still alive.
It's heartbreaking. So the immediate question for those families is, okay, what now? Does this help us?
Right. Does this singular U.S. deal mean anything for those who aren't American citizens? The hope, of course, is that it could somehow unlock something bigger.
Like a broader deal.
Exactly. Comprehensive agreement, release everyone, maybe lead to a ceasefire, get that desperately needed aid into Gaza for, over 2 million civilians?
That's the hope. And the CNN report did say an Israeli delegation is apparently planning to go to Doha.
To work on those bigger negotiations, yeah.
And President Trump, according to the report, is casting this as a major step, calling it a first of the final steps.
Emphasizing the enormous diplomatic effort and pressure from the U.S. side.
Okay, but let's talk motivations. Why would Hamas do this, especially in this direct way with the U.S.?
Well, the CNN report floats a few possibilities. One is that it's a kind of goodwill gesture.
You mean?
Meaning releasing a high-profile hostage, an American citizen, without demanding a huge prisoner swap right now. Maybe trying to look less intransigent.
Interesting. Like a strategic move.
Yeah.
The report also mentioned maybe trying to curry favor with the Trump administration.
That's definitely in the mix. Trying to gain some leverage, maybe put pressure on Netanyahu indirectly through the Americans.
Or another angle mentioned was trying to stop Israel from expanding its ground operation, like giving them a reason to pause.
Possibly. And there was that intriguing detail in the report about a White House envoy apparently communicating directly with Hamas,
Yeah, what was that?
suggesting that releasing Alexander now would buy them a lot of credit with President Trump.
Especially before his trip to the region. That timing seems significant.
It really does. Which brings us squarely to Netanyahu.
Right, because his government wasn't involved in this deal. His focus, publicly at least, has been the military goal.
And now he's facing, as the report puts it, enormous pressure.
From who? The Israeli public.
From the public, absolutely.
Yeah.
Who see one hostage freed and desperately want more. But also, presumably, pressure from the U.S. government itself, which just demonstrated it can act independently on this.
It's a tough spot. What was his immediate reaction?
His statement, reported by CNN, was that negotiations will continue, but under fire.
Meaning military operations continue alongside any talks.
Seems so. It underlines just how incredibly tense and, well, volatile the situation remains, even with this positive news for one family.
And we have to quickly touch on the wider context here. The timing.
Yeah, President Trump's trip to the Middle East.
Visiting Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE.
All right.
But crucially, not Israel.
Right. That detail, also mentioned in the CNN report, certainly adds fuel to the speculation about the U.S.-Israel relationship right now.
And connects to those earlier reports about U.S. frustration with Netanyahu's handling of the conflict.
It provides a potential backdrop, doesn't it, for why the U.S. might have chosen this very direct, very unusual path with Hamas for Edan Alexander's release.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've seen this really surprising U.S.-led deal secure Edan Alexander's release.
A deal that completely bypassed the Israeli government.
Which has naturally sparked a lot of hope. Hope for a wider agreement for the other hostages, maybe even a ceasefire.
But it also throws up huge questions about everyone's motives, Hamas, the U.S., Israel, and it certainly puts immense pressure on Netanyahu.
So the big question we're left with, maybe for you listening to ponder, what does this unilateral American action really signal about the shifting sands in the region, about who holds the leverage now?
It's a complex situation, and this development just added another layer of complexity. A lot to watch.
See you soon.